Henderson. Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Sherwood. Representative Stiff.
Here.
Representative Walters. Representative Swanitzer.
Here.
Chairman Nicholas.
Here. Okay, we're gonna do a couple quick re-referrals. First up is House Bill 229. Electronic payment of sales and use taxes. AT, fire away. What do we got?
Morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Today we have House Bill 229, electronic payment of sales and use taxes. When you look through the bill, you'll notice that we're referring to statute 39-15-107, and then later on, statute 39-16-107. That's the sales tax and the use tax statute respectively. And you'll notice that the language repeats when it's changing it. Here it says the department may provide an option for the return to be submitted and for any taxes to be remitted electronically. So what that basically does is allows the county treasurers to convert their current manual system of submitting returns to the Department of Revenue to now they'll be able to submit it online. And that's comes in with the amendment for $228,000 for the Department of Revenue to get that IT support set up. The other part or the other edit in the statute is the county treasurer may allow the taxes to be paid electronically, which basically just clarifies that when someone purchases a vehicle, they can pay the treasurer online. I plan to bring an amendment later on committee of the whole that clarifies that that they can pay online after the treasurer calculates the taxes, because there's some things they have to do with the dealer paperwork and before they can charge that tax. So that will be an amendment on the committee of the whole, but I stand for any questions.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, any concerns from our treasurers, their association on impacts to them? Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, so that amendment on the committee of the whole will alleviate their concerns. That's what they expressed in the committee on this specific bill was just clarifying that that they have to calculate that or determine the sales tax before someone can pay it online.
How did you come up with the 228?
You know, that was a number that was provided to me by the Department of Revenue, and that's what their contractor had requested to get that form set up.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering if there's any consideration for loss of revenue that may be eaten up by credit card fees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is a concern, and I'm willing to look at that as a committee of the whole amendment on the bill.
Okay. Any public comment? Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Motion on the bill.
Move to pass.
Pass. Representative Stiff, seconded by Representative Henderson. Roll call.
Representative Henderson.
Aye.
Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood. Representative Stiff.
Aye.
Representative Walters.
Left to vote.
He did not.
He did not excuse.
Representative Swanitzer.
Aye.
Chairman Nicholas.
Okay. We expect those amendments here and on time. Okay. Okay, we have next is House Bill 100, I believe. Which is coming out now. So go ahead, Representative Jennings, tell us what this bill does and what the money's for.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's one that I typically don't do as a study, but I think this is an important enough issue that we don't know what we don't know. And so in lieu of all of the property tax issues that are gone on in several of the counties of the state, a lot of constituents have come and asked for looking at this at least. And so we're looking at a study. This one's a little more robust than what you guys looked at last year. And they put a placeholder in of 10,000. Department of Revenue had talked with a company that would provide this study for about 38,000. And so in committee, they put a 50,000 just to have a little leeway because they'll put it out to bid. And so that's what we're looking for.
So just tell us, what's your rationale for the acquisition studies for?
Well, there's a lot of people, a state way out to the west that very seldom ever does anything correct. But in this case, there's a lot of people that have moved here and lots of people that I've talked to almost without fail have said that's one of the things that they thought the state had done right. Now, the bureaucracies do not like it, and they made a number of mistakes in how they implemented that. There's no question. And so in order to look at that, you would not want to transition without having a full look at it.
So basically, it's a study to determine the acquisition value of the property for your property value basis.
What a transition, Mr. Chairman, what a transition might look like. How you would try to miss the mistakes that were possibly brought out in Proposition 13.
I appreciate the indulgence. We're just here to look at the money, but I'm just curious because I hadn't studied that. So it is the intent that you'd base the property tax rather than on the appraised value of it is based on the acquisition?
Acquisition, and that would be the basic, Mr. Chairman and Representative.
And then would that move as improvements are done to a based on any changes there, or would you anticipate that it just stay based on the acquisition?
Mr. Chairman, so Representative, that's part of what this study would do, is because there were problems in how California implemented their Prop 13, and they've had battles back and forth, and we're a smaller state, we're different. I think what we're asking, and the questions in this study were brought up by DOR and the county assessors. We put them collaboratively working on these questions that they would, and this is a first step in it, just to look and see. My feeling to that question specifically would be that you would look at what it costs to build the add-on, and you would add that on to the original. And then if there was a cap of 2 or 3% over on the overall.
So what primarily we need to know is what the impact on our property taxes would be if this was implemented.
Yes,
That's what the study would probably share.
Mr. Chairman, that is hopes that we would see there to look at several things of what it would impact, how you would do different implementing of this type of tax.
And so currently there's an amendment that has $50,000 for studies that would then, and the Department of Revenue be responsible for obtaining those studies.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's they had talked to a company that would do it for 38, but they have to put it out for bids. So they wanted, and it reverts back whatever it is not used.
Okay, any questions? Go ahead, Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Who would you envision would do this study? And then how or what mechanism would be put in place to make sure that we're getting accurate numbers on the acquisition value? And how much do you reckon that will cost?
Mr. Chairman. So Representative, the accuracy of it, I mean, that's why we're putting it out to study. And we're trying to get, the DOR is basically overlooking that. That's why they put the sideboards on this. They had the questions that they wanted to ask, the very basic questions. Now they're going to, in the bill, it tells them to look at other states that have implemented parts of acquisition type tax. And so they would compare those. the accuracy, I mean, I don't know how you verify. You hope you get a good company to do the study. And DOR, I think, is looking at that.
Okay, any public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Motion on the re-referral.
Move the bill.
Okay, moved by Representative Larson, second by Representative Walter. Any discussion? Okay. As presented, roll call.
Representative Henderson. Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood. Representative Stiff.
Aye.
Representative Walters will put excuse. Representative Swanitzer.
Aye.
Chairman Nicholas.
Aye. So Jackie, is 189 a re-referral
189.
or 198?
188 was not a,
198.
what's, pardon me?
198.
198.
It's got yellow highlight on it. But I don't see a, I don't have it.
198 is a re-referral.
Do we all have those, Jack?
No.
Okay. Just the special guy?
I have it.
So is anyone here to present 198? It's actually really simple. So this is called Civil Service Commission Administration. It's an act relating to cities and towns, authorizing city clerks to name a designee to serve as ex officio clerk of the Civil Service Commission within the Clerks Incorporated Municipality, providing for an effective date. So is there any public discussion on it? We're just gonna kick these out as quick as we can. 'Cause we're short on time. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. We have a motion on the bill.
Move.
Go ahead, Representative Henderson. Go ahead.
He made the second.
Okay, second, all right. I just want to check and see if there's an amendment. Jackie, do we know if there was an amendment to this bill?
If there is an amendment, I would attach it, and there isn't.
Okay, so we don't know why this was referred to us. I don't see any fiscal note. So, roll call.
Representative Henderson. Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood. Representative Stiff.
Aye.
Representative Swanitzer.
Aye.
Chairman Nicholas.
Aye.
So, Mr. Chairman, would this have possibly been referred to as back as a direct referral because another committee was too busy?
No, that was House Bill 188,
Yeah.
but not 198 was a re-referral.
Okay, let's go pull up House Bill 195. Come on up. Frankie Hanky.
Ain't the cowboy.
Why don't you just walk us through this bill, Hank?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hank Oversland, LSO. I'll just walk you through the changes since you last saw it, I think a couple weeks ago.
So,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, so just for the folks that are on and watching this, so this was a JAC bill that and so we've already passed the bill as a joint appropriations. Now it's on the House side, and you're going to walk us from that point forward. Is that right, Hank?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, that's correct.
Thank
So
you.
there's very few changes that the JAC made 2 weeks ago about. So you can go to page 4 of the bill, line 32, lines 32 and 33. There was an increase of 5 million. We also updated the footnote 17 that can be found on pages 11 and 12. And when we get to that part of the bill, I can point those out.
We added 5 million. Hank.
Correct. And that was for housing. It was an amendment on the 2 weeks ago, and it was for housing infrastructure to the local government support projects. There was also another change to that footnote to put 7.5 million towards the exact language is to set aside of that 55 million now, 7.5 million for providing grants to local governments for healthcare memory units serving patients who live in isolation to slow the progression of depression and mental health diseases. And then moving on to page 5, you can see lines 11 and 12. There was in communication with the Supreme Court, it was shown, and I'll point you to the updated memorandum that you have, that should be part of your packet, that has all the colors on the back. As part of that, the Supreme Court said that they weren't going to use a majority of that PPE in tests. So the JAC reverted that, and any of the reversions will go towards the mental health diversion program.
Go ahead.
And can I apologize? It's me. My mind's wandering this morning. Could you back up just one step and give me the page you're on and what you just said, please?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, this is page 5 of the bill, lines 11 and 12.
Okay.
So the action JAC took in January did not appropriate any more funds for this program. Rather, it takes any reversions, which the Supreme Court indicated could be as much as 145,000, and diverted that to the mental health diversion program.
Ah, that's right.
And the footnote 24 is also updated, and that's on page 16. And we can go, I'll move on to pages 11 and 12 and point out the updates on page 10, actually at the bottom, lines 20 through 22. That's for the
What page again?
page 10.
Okay.
Lines 20 through 23. That's for the Health and Human Services capital construction. All that changes in red is making it so that it's for existing applications. That was an action taken in January by the Joint Appropriations Committee. Then moving on to page 12, that lines 7 through 19, that first part, 7 through 13.
So so on that footnote on 10, the bottom of 10, and that carries over in onto line 11, is that the new language, or is the new language pertaining to Roman and one IV on 10? Does that come over to B on 12? Where's the? It says the state loan should only consider application grant under this footnote that were submitted before for grants under this footnote. Okay, that completed that. That just says no more, right?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, that's correct. And what this does currently is that the 30 million that JAC added to the Health and Human Services capital construction was for the general. As you noted in subsections B and C, there was money that was set aside for different things. So subsection B was for community mental health center, regional crisis stabilization facilities, and women's substance and use disorder facilities. And subsection C was for grants to rural health clinics. But the money, the extra money that you appropriated, the 30 million, went to the general pot of money for the SLIB to allocate, which has been fully allocated. And so all this says is that no new existing applications will be considered for this $30 million.
Okay, so it's all been obligated.
The 85 million that was appropriated last year has been obligated. Yes, that's correct. And that you can see that in this memo. Moving on to page 12, lines 7 through 13. That's that 7.5 million that of the 55 million for the local government support projects, that 7.5 million for memory care units. And then lines 15 through 19, subsection C, is the 5 million that JAC added in January. And that's for the purpose of providing grants to localities for unmet affordable housing needs. through infrastructure and utilities.
Okay.
Page 13, lines 13 through 15 is that same language that we saw on page 10. All this does is says that the additions, this is now for eligible water and sewer projects. So the additions, the additional 30 million that was appropriated there will now only is for existing applications as well. So that does the same thing. And I'll stop here and note, I know that there was interest from the committee. The Senate had a bill, Senate File 82, that was sponsored by the Select Water Committee.
What's the number again?
Senate File 82. And that appropriated $39.3 million. In the process of the Senate passing the bill, they adopted an amendment that would reduce it dollar for dollar by any other appropriations to the same program. So 39.3 million right now as it stands, and I think you can see on the profile and this one-page summary sheet that also should be attached to your bill. That program will get an additional supplemental this year of 39.3 million. 30 million of it comes from this bill that we're considering right now, House Bill 195. 9.3 million will come from Senate File 82 because they reduced it dollar for dollar by any other appropriations to that same exact program in an amendment. They also adopted another amendment that made it for existing applications and used the same language as we have in House Bill 195.
So was there also a bill or an amendment that says any leftover funds would be used for water projects?
JEC, and I believe it comes in section 5, adopted an amendment that uses any reversions from any of these programs, uses any of those reversions to go towards the Goshen irrigation tunnels 1 and 2. So I think the Water Development Commission reports quarterly, and they work with the state auditor's office to get any reversions from ARPA funds.
Yes, that was our amendment.
Correct, yes, and that is in this bill.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, moving on. There was no other changes that joint appropriations made, and well, I'll point you to page 16, lines 17 through 19. That is where we use those reversions. Not used for COVID-19 mitigation measures for the study, planning, and design of diversionary treatments and systems of care for defendants with mental illness and substance abuse illnesses. Again, that's page 16, lines 17 through 20. And then on page 18, footnote 30, recall the Department of Family Services had told us that they had $25,000 left over. So all that JAC did was move that from the planning stage to the implementation stage.
So, Mr. Chairman. So I had, and maybe we'll get a head nod from the director of that 200. Is that's the food security? I thought we had 250. We've only expended 25. Oh, or we have 25 left. We only have 25 left. And so the way this reads is appropriation 200. So then do we compensate for that down in here, Hank?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, that's correct. So
Okay.
now that number, instead of 3 million,
Oh, there it
increased to
is. Thank you.
3.025 million for the
Pass
implementation
me, can you?
grants.
Sorry.
No worries. Mr. Chairman, moving on to page 21, that's where we see section 3, the bulk of it, the table for section 3. The only addition that JAC made in January was lines 13 and 14. For the difficult to employ self-sufficiency program, JAC adopted or appropriated 2.25 million and change for that program. I will note that, and I believe that there may be an amendment out there. There was some confusion on this. The motion that was made was very clear to put this in the Department of Workforce Services, and that's how it had come out originally in the governor's fiscal profile. in the governor's letter 18, they preferred it to be appropriated to the Department of Family Services. Right now in the bill, it goes to Workforce Services Agency 53, but I think there was some confusion.
Is there an amendment out there, or can we can make that amendment right now?
Yeah.
And we show that, okay, that's on page 22.
Page 21, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, page 21, lines 13 and 14.
Well, but it doesn't show.
And then you would have to make the amendment also to page 23.
Yes, 23. No,
Yeah, footnote 4 as well. But we'd have to update the table as well.
okay, go ahead.
Well, and how about? Okay, good. I'm good.
Mr. Chairman, if there, I'll stand for any questions, but that's the, well, I will move on to page 26. That's the section 5. That's the language that uses any reversions from any of the programs in sections 2, which is the Senate File 66 appropriations from 2022, or section 3. So any of those appropriations, if there's reversions, those will be obligated, those will
So
then.
it's just swapping out general fund for.
It was originally, it was an LSRA to the water development account too. So it'll be an ARPA instead of LSRA. LSRA is already obligated. So this is saying whatever is eligible and can be used from ARPA is going to be used first. And then the LSRA will backstop it essentially.
And then, and Hank, we're going to put an amendment on there that limits it to the amount, but we'll do that in our.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, yeah, that's correct.
questions for Hank? Public comment? Any public comment? Come on up. Everyone that wants to come up. Jump in the
Come
chairs.
on, come all. Good morning, ladies.
Morning, Jennifer.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Jennifer Scoggin, Director, Office of State Lands and Investments with me. You all know Beth Blackwell, our Grants and Loans Manager, and Amanda Sewell, our Assistant Director for our Financial and Administrative Services Division. We have just sort of a clarification question related to the additional funds for the local government support under footnote 17, where there's an additional 5 million that's been added for, as we understand on page 12, subsection C. We're clear with that. What we're unclear about is subsection B, which is the $7.5 million for those additional applications. Right now, the SLIB board has closed the application period for the local government projects. They were intending to award those some $50 million in funds on February 27th through 28th. So our question is, since there's not an additional 7.5 million added in for subsection B, is it the intention that the SLIB would hold that back and address that at a later time? Or we're just a little bit unclear with respect to the expectation. We want to make sure we understand.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think the question is very valid. So when we put this in there, it was of the existing funds, had not contemplated that this bill would not pass maybe until after SLIB had met and made those appropriations. So we're going to have to, maybe the only other way you could do that is, so right now, even if this passed, there's nothing governing how SLIB views what we do. And the other thing we could do is consider doing an amendment to this and add money to it designated for such a thing. I believe and so I guess I'm asking for some confirmation. Would that be the easiest way to clean that up?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson. So not having a crystal ball and not knowing the future, if the SLIB were to fund this at the end of February, I think the easiest route would be to just add the additional $7.5 million. And knowing that if SLIB were to award the funds through ARPA, then those would go to either not be used if they were general fund funds or however you intended to fund it.
So it would even be fair to say that, geez, I don't know, if there was some, it may not even be, there may not be any projects left that weren't funded that would even qualify for additional funds with this language.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, that would be correct. This
Yeah.
is the sole application we have for a memory care.
Okay.
Say
Chairman.
that again.
We
You
only
have,
have-
you have the application.
We have a single application, yes, that would fit this definition.
Yeah, and we're aware of that.
Correct. And so I think the one thing to keep in note within the local government pot of money is non-water and sewer projects take a priority over water and sewer projects. And currently, based on what we've received, and these are soft numbers because we're still working with applicants, we only have 13 applications totaling just over $17 million that are non-water and sewer applications that were submitted to the local government program.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
so Director Beth, does it make sense to reopen up the application period then? That way you'd be able to do this in a more rational way. You'd be able to have the non-water applicants, perhaps who were unaware or thought that the water projects would overwhelm the pot or something. And also would allow for a fair process for memory care unit applicants to have notice of the law, and you shift it out maybe by 3 or 4 months and do it that way.
Chairman, Representative Stith. That's a difficult question because I think the entities that followed the rules, got their ducks in a row, were able to apply because we sent out many notices for this. I think opening the entire application for that program would be difficult. However, if we just opened it for memory care or facilities that would meet this definition, I think that would be appropriate.
Chairman,
Go ahead.
but if you're going to open it up for memory care applicants, why would it make any difference to open it up to everybody?
Well, if we are looking at $7.5 million and that's the pot of money we're looking to award, my thought would be it's essentially a new little pot of money that we're reviewing grant applications for rather than the whole pot of money. I mean, there's several ways to look at it. And the unfortunate thing with ARPA is there's no right answer. It can work either way. So that's just my thought. In all reality, we currently are working with entities right now. They have a very short turnaround to get their corrected applications to us because they were submitted on the 23rd. We've reviewed them for completeness. Now we're going back to the applicants to get the stuff that was incomplete on their applications in order so the eligibility review can happen in time for those February 27th and 28th meetings.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So again, I think what we've done here with footnote B is that's all fine and dandy. There just may not be any money left because the SLIB's already acted on it. And so it's a moot point. If we added 7.5, then you could, if for some reason there was money left in the local government, if after SLIB had done these priority, then come down to water and sewer. And at the end of that day, if for some reason, which is probably unlikely, there's money, you could take that with the 7.5, open it back up to the world, frankly, on anything. So I think we're saying, again, B is nice, but it probably day late and dollar short.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I know that you're still reviewing these applications and thank you for that work. So I heard that you have 13 applications totaling 17 million that are non-water and sewer. Do you have a sense of how many water and sewer applications and what that total is? Thank you.
Chairman Nicholas, Representative Sherwood. Total, we received 92 applications for 164 million. Well, almost 65 million, so round up to 165 million. 27 of those applications are from entities that had already received funding totaling 62 million, almost $63 million. So then we have the 13 million that are remaining, or the 13 apps that are non-water and sewer. And then per my calculations, the rest are essentially, so you have 79 that are water and sewer. So essentially 75% of our applicants are water and sewer. I did go back and look at the applicants, kind of implemented the SLIBS methodology that they had used with water and sewer of picking the top priority and only funding one for an entity. That resulted in 39 applications. However, the total is almost $80 million. So of that, 18 of those applications totaling 33 million can go back to being funded under the water and sewer project based on the language of the current bill where we do not accept additional applications. So there's a lot of moving parts. Unfortunately, nothing's an easy answer when it comes to the ARPA funds. Yep.
Okay, further questions? Further questions? Okay, other public comments? Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, committee, I'm Sarah Dorenzo. I'm the executive director of the Wyoming Economic Development Association. WEDA represents over 200 economic developers, communities, and entities throughout Wyoming who work to foster economic growth and viability in the state. I'm speaking today in favor of the proposed allocation of $5 million to the American Rescue Plan through the local government grant program to support unmet housing needs. This is one of the most impactful uses of ARPA funds for Wyoming. In a survey by the Wyoming Association of Municipalities, 88% of cities surveyed said they need affordable housing and 83% need workforce housing. So these ARPA funds are crucial to the availability of attainable and affordable housing because it's a constraint to economic sustainability and growth in Wyoming communities. This $5 million for housing infrastructure will be a beneficial start to confronting housing issues in Wyoming because it directs money to the local level to solve housing problems. It immediately puts this one-time money to use, and it signals that Wyoming is investing in our workforce. It also collects information on investment, economic outcomes, and needs. WEDA just thanks Governor Gordon, this committee, and Representative Sherwood for all your work and leadership and advocacy on this ARPA bill, and I'll answer any questions.
Any questions? All right, appreciate your comments. Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Dan Dorsch, Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity of Laramie County. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you this morning. I also am here to support the unmet housing needs proposal to use $5 million of ARPA funding for housing needs here in Wyoming. And I would like to illustrate some of the need that we are facing right now in our state. Currently at the Cheyenne Housing Authority and Casper Housing Authorities, which represent multiple municipalities, there's 3,000 people waiting for affordable housing. Currently, the programs we have and the funding from the federal government create roughly 250 affordable units in a year statewide. So with our current funding and current programs, we will meet our current need in roughly 13 years. So you see the need for an investment in housing for our communities. Affordable housing, workforce housing, to echo what Ms. Dorenzo has said, is essential for our workforce and for our economic development and our growth as a state. A couple examples of why it's important. Here in Cheyenne, we have members of our community and our workforce who live in Pine Bluffs and Kimball, Nebraska, because they can't afford a decent place to live here in Wyoming. Days like today illustrate the need why our workforce should live here in our community, because with the wind and the weather, it makes it hard to commute. It adds strains to their already strained budget because they're spending extra money on getting to work. Another example is there are a large portion of our airmen who work at Warren Air Force Base who live in Fort Collins and drive every day to Cheyenne because they can't afford a decent place to live here in Cheyenne. And it's not specific to Cheyenne. Again, Wyoming Association of Municipalities, their survey, all our communities are facing housing and workforce housing needs. So this money is a start, but I would also urge you to invest more in our communities and for workforce housing. And I'll close on saying, over the last several years, our workforce, the term we have heard is essential workers, right? Our grocery store clerks, our bankers, our hotel workers. We've heard this term essential workers. And if they are truly essential, then their housing should be essential as well. Thank you so much. And I'm open to any questions.
Questions? All right, appreciate your comments. Any other public?
Mr. Chairman, we do have online.
Okay, so just so everybody knows, the Appropriations Committee has to defend 50-odd amendments in about an hour and a half. So we've got to do our homework for it. So if we could make our comments short, we'd appreciate it. Because we're just now getting the amendments that we got to review and study for this morning. So, all right, go ahead, please.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Scott Oversland, Executive Director of the Wyoming Community Development Authority. I just want to ask for your support for the $5 million amendment for infrastructure of the ARPA funds. I think it is, as Dan and Sarah both said, it's much needed for the unmet housing needs in the state. We see that all around the state, not in only areas like Cheyenne and Casper, but Sheridan, Jackson, Kimmer, everywhere in the state is in need of additional housing. So I think that the $5 million for infrastructure is a good start, and I would support, and I stand in support of that. So thank you for your time and for your work.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Any other public comments? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment. We have any amendments?
Move the bill.
Move the bill. Representative Larson, seconded by Representative Henderson. Any amendments?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So on page 26, this will be the first amendment. I would like to, on line 9, we did put a limit on the amount of money that could be put into the Goshen Water Project, or how much could be swapped out. So on page 6, line 9, after funds, put not to exceed $21,810,000. We don't anticipate that there'll be those reversions, but we just
a
more
safety net.
technical correction to make sure that it matches what the general fund is.
Mr. Chairman, what page is that on?
On page, I apologize, Representative Stith. It's on page 26 on line 9 after funds. Then we would put not to exceed the $21,810,000.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. And let's go to page 21.
Mr. Mr. Chairman, if we could go to page 23.
23 line 12.
Yes.
EFS for workforce services.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, right, Mr. Chairman, I'd move that on page 23,
line 12, under that footnote 4, that we change the agency to Department of Family Services.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, that motion carries. Any other amendments?
Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to find, please bear with me. Yes, on page 12,
Go ahead.
I would propose that we take the ambiguity out of what we're asking the state lands and investments to do and delete lines 7 through 13. Just pull that section out.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Does that work? Okay, any other amendments? Okay,
Oh, Mr. Chairman,
go ahead.
I've got another amendment, and if I get a second, we'll just kind of explain it. And it was to just say that to the extent the total sum of appropriations in this plan, and if there's others, that what we have here governs. And so it would be a new section 6. So we've got a second, it'd be on page 27 after line 10. We'd insert a section 7 and say, to the extent the total sum of appropriations made under any law enacted in the 2023 general session exceed the amount of unexpended money. So we show we have 12. Exceed the unobligated American Rescue Plan Act direct funds available for expenditure. The appropriations made under this act govern.
All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, that motion carries, and we've got the amendment on here for you.
Thank you.
Any other amendments? Seeing none. Go ahead.
Just testing the water here. Is there any interest in increasing our funding for housing, affordable housing? I know, I'm just wondering if it's easier to put it in the ARPA funds.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that I believe the interest is there, but once we have the budget bill out, we could determine how successful that was and then adapt with the unexpended funds there, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, any other amendments? As amended, roll call.
Representative Henderson. Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood. Representative Stiff.
Aye.
Representative Walters. Representative Swanitzer.
Aye.
Chairman Nicholas.
Aye. Okay. Thank you, everybody. That was easy.